Hi, folks. Welcome back to our Just the News, Real America's Voice special, Freeing Classrooms from Ideology, the Fight Against Critical Race Theory. Now, we've heard a lot of what's happening in Washington, what's happening in the states, and now we're going to hear from parents who are taking on critical race theory at the local school level. Joining us now are Nicole Solis, a Rhode Island mom, who is being sued by the nation's largest teachers union because she tried to find out what her child was learning at school. And Alvin Liu, a parent who moved his family from California to the Midwest in hopes of escaping critical race theory, only to find it was in Indiana too. Both of you, I really want to welcome you. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Nicole, let me start with you. Your efforts have captured the eyes of the nation. You tried to just find out what your child was learning at school, and all of a sudden you find yourself being sued for that. Tell us what drove your concerns about what was being taught at school and why the National Education Association local affiliates tried to sue you.
Well, a year or two ago, my school pledged allegiance to Black Lives Matter. They used all the code words like ridding the school of systemic inequities. They said the school was systemically racist. And when I enrolled my daughter in kindergarten, I decided to see if they really followed through with all of these promises they made with this ideology. I talked to the principal, who said that they do teach concepts of critical race theory and gender theory. They don't call the kids boys and girls. They refrain from using gender terminology. They embed the values of gender identity in the classroom. And with critical race theory, they ask 5-year-olds what could have been done differently at Thanksgiving. And then they said that they have a certain line of thinking about history that they teach kids at an age-appropriate level in every grade. When I asked more questions about what exactly they're teaching them, they told me to submit public records requests because they didn't want to answer my questions directly. When I submitted a lot of public records requests to get my questions answered, they then turned around and threatened to sue me. They ultimately decided not to sue me, but now the NEA, the National Education Association, is suing me to prevent the disclosure of that information from my public records request. And they're claiming that if this information comes out, their teachers will be vulnerable to harassment, which is ridiculous. No one wants anybody to be harassed, but we know that critical race theory is in public school, and it should be disclosed so that people can participate in robust public debate about the value of this in public school. But the teachers union is now suing me to try to prevent all of that from happening.
Really remarkable. Schools that are paid with tax dollars, teachers on the taxpayers' dime, and they don't want to share what they're teaching your children. Pretty remarkable story. Alvin, I want to turn to you because you uprooted your family from California. You took them to Indiana, and in hopes of finding a more moderate school curriculum. What shocked you when you got to Indiana?
Well, when I first started seeing some of the seeds being planted, it was things that we would recognize that a lot of people here wouldn't, just because we kind of lived through the end of it. And so, the question was, well, do we want to fight it here again? Because when California, by the time we realized it, we couldn't do anything about it.
Right.
We were like 25 years too late, 20 years too late by the time we realized it, because we were the first of its kind. But here in Indiana, there's still a window. And I know for people here, it's really overwhelming because this is the first time they've experienced this kind of all-out attack, especially at the school level. And when it happens really quick because they have all these different things, all these different programs and things in place for the last 5 to 7 years, and nobody noticed them. So when they pull all these levers, it feels very sudden for a lot of parents. But there's still a window here that parents can fight. It's just that the window closes really, really quick because once they start indoctrinating the schools at this level, it goes really, really fast.
It does. Now, you've gotten involved, Alvin, in a group called Unify Carmel. Describe what why'd you become active and what that group is doing and what other parents could learn from it.
Sure. The reason why, there was a point of not doing anything because we moved here not to do this, but I guess the question for us was, well, where's my daughter going to go? Where's my kids going to go kind of thing, right? Once the Midwest goes, that's it. Because nobody's escaping from a boat from the U.S. to Cuba, right? And so Unify Carmel is just a parent-led group. It's a grassroots parent-led, grandparents-led group. And it's just parents and grandparents who want to see the schools just go back to focusing on high rigor academics. Where we're from in Carmel here in Indiana, it's one of the best school systems in the country, one of the best in the country. And so they got there because of the focus on high rigor academics, because a good education helps everyone, especially if you're a minority. And so the last few years, they've really been turning towards that social justice, that diversity, inclusion, equity type of ideology, the CRT, the gender propaganda, all that stuff. And so we just really want all that to be left at home to the parents. We're not saying it's wrong or right. We're just saying you got to leave it to parents. Mm-hmm. And it's not right to have it for a captive audience, because there's children. They can't do anything about it. They can't go anywhere. And when you have these activist teachers that bring this stuff in, you're literally taking hostage, a captive audience of children.
Yeah, I think both of you want your children to be taught how to think and how to learn, but not what to think. That's your job as parents, and it seems as though the schools are usurping that. Nicole, I want to go back to you because it's funny, I was in Connecticut, and your name came up in Connecticut. You're a household name. People have really embraced the bravery that you've shown in this. Yeah. Tell us a little bit, Nicole, about what message you've taken away from the teachers' resistance to want to show parents what they're being taught to their children. What did you make of that when you saw that?
Well, I think that there's a logical disconnect here. Sometimes people are surprised to learn that as public employees, they are more accountable to the public than perhaps they thought, because maybe they're not really used to the public asking for that accountability. And I think that the more we have parents telling them that they have to tell us what they're doing, what they're teaching, we can maybe ease into a new paradigm where it's not scary when people ask what you're doing, because hopefully eventually you're not doing anything wrong or controversial. I also really like what Alvin said when, just to segue for a second, he said that he doesn't want to really focus on, whether you like critical race theory or not. And I think that's really the heart of the matter, because public school is not the place for ideological teaching. Public school would become more like a church. And we already have separation of church and state. So I think if people focus less on what they think about critical race theory and just understand that it is a value system and a belief system that is subjective, maybe we can all agree that it just shouldn't be in public school. Maybe it can go somewhere else, like the home, but it can't be in public school.
Yeah, such an important point. And I've heard a lot of people say that this is the beginning of teaching a religion in schools. Now, we got about 2 minutes left. I want to address this last question to both of you. The media describes CRT often as a red versus blue political debate, but for both of you, this has been a very personal decision about your children. I just want to ask you, what as a parent concerns you about the CRT education and lessons, and what advice would you give other parents who share those concerns? Nicole, let's start with you.
Well, it's ideological, it's subjective. Personally, I believe it's dehumanizing and toxic and can lead to a very destructive, slippery slope. And parents need to know exactly what their kids are learning, because ultimately I think it's going to separate children from their parents and separate children from their family and their family's values. And public school is not meant for that. So parents need to start submitting public records requests and start asking about what exactly the lessons are and the lesson materials, and use all those code words: equity, systemic racism. They want you to believe that it's either a blue or red issue, but it's not. If you're a parent, you are in charge of what your kids are learning, and it doesn't matter whether you're Democrat, Republican, liberal, or progressive. You're the one that raises your children with the values that you want, and that shouldn't be a partisan issue.
Yeah, such an important point. Alvin, how about you? What drove you to do this, and what advice do you have for other parents?
Well, a good education is good for everybody. A rising tide raises all ships. In the Asian culture, we believe in that one generation concept, in that no matter where your parents come from, they could just come with a shirt on their backs, but you're only one generation away from changing the bloodline, the destiny of your bloodline, just one generation. So we teach our children to look one generation ahead of why you can be successful. Critical race theory teaches you to look 3 generations behind as to why you can't. And That's why we 100% disagree with that. And for parents, I would say, don't give labels power. The reason why we lost California is because we pretty much died in silence, because they used the same tactic, the racist, the bigot, all those different things. But those words only have power if you give it to them. And those are the words. I mean, I always say that a parent can run into a burning building and save their kids, but one word, one label, they'll be quiet and not protect their kids. And I think that's silly. It doesn't matter what they call you. This is the hill worth dying on, because you only get one shot at raising your kids. And if you don't protect them, they're going to raise them. And they're going to raise them under this ideology. You're never going to get them back.
Such an important point. Nicole, Alvin, thank you so much for joining us tonight and for sharing your insights. Folks, stick around. Dr. Ben Carson will be joining us next. We'll be right back after a quick commercial break.